Now, Wisconsin's latest budget included major cuts to the UW system, and the Board of Regents just approved changes to tenure as required by that budget.
Our next guest says Wisconsin is not alone, that other states are seeing major budget cuts and controversies, and he says it's no accident. It's part of a conservative-led movement to cut funding and overhaul public universities.
He tells that story in a new documentary called Starving the Beast, the battle to disrupt and reform America's public universities. It screens next week, Wednesday and Thursday at the Wisconsin Film Festival. You can find schedule information at the Wisconsin Film Festival website.
Steve Mims joins us now. He's the writer and director of the documentary Starving the Beast. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, Steve, you talked to Democratic political consultant James Carville in this documentary, and here he is talking about Wisconsin specifically.
Look at the University of Wisconsin. I mean, this is like one of the prime land-grant public universities in the United States. They're trying to rip that place completely apart.
Now, we've heard a lot about our UW system here in Wisconsin, but the story you're telling in this movie and that James Carville is part of here, seeing this as a national trend. This is not just Wisconsin. What do you see going on nationwide?
Well, when we started the film, we were following a story that was here. I live in Austin, Texas, and we were following what was happening at the University of Texas. And that involved the potential impeachment of a guy from the Board of Regents. And in covering that story, we moved on to Texas A&M, which had already had problems, and that led us to Wisconsin and everyplace else. And it turns out that what we found in the research is that funding for public universities has radically declined over a 35-year period, and that since that's happened, the cost of education has been shifted over to students and to their families, rather than being paid for by the state or underwritten so much by the state, and that had happened everywhere, and that a reform movement was underway at all these schools, including Wisconsin, and so there were these moves made to somehow find different sources of funding and to change the nature of public universities in general.
Is this a conscious effort, do you think, at the national level to change the mission, the funding process, all of that for American universities?
That's what we found, yeah, that there are groups, they're mostly coordinated through market-oriented think tanks, starting in Washington, D.C., but basically networked throughout the country. And it's purely a philosophical issue. Like the original idea for public education, public higher ed, was that the states would put a lot of money into public higher ed because the people who got a great degree would turn around and put that money back into the state. And that was the ideal for a long time. It still is, but there are a lot of people now who view it totally differently. And they think that they have a market-oriented view, and they think that if you walk out of a place like UW-Madison with a degree that has a market value, that you should shoulder a lot more of the cost of getting that degree because you're going to make more money over a lifetime. So there are people on both sides of this issue who are basically believe in that idea or in the other idea.
Well, you focused in on the mission of the university here in Wisconsin. Here's a bit from the documentary. UW-Madison professor Grant Petty from the Oceanic and Atmospheric Sciences Department talking about a change to the UW mission originally written into the state's most recent budget proposal.
The very fact that there was an impulse to remove that statement from the statute was a philosophical shift that was a very sharp break with the history of the university, from being about the search for truth, about being an idea factory for civilization, to simply preparing students to join the workforce. It's a much narrower view of the mission of the university than most of us who work here would like to accept.
Do you see Steve, this change in mission happening at universities around the country, changing that, what you said was the historical, original mission of universities?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the amazing things in the film, I think, is because we have people who are very articulate about this, and there's a concern not only with the financial aspects of this, like to reduce taxes, to reduce reduce the burden of taxpayers to have to pay for these institutions. Beyond that, there's another concern about really the ideas that are that people get exposed to in universities. And so that falls right in line with, like, are we making an institution that helps people? Again, I'm trying to be very careful about this because I don't want to sound slanted one way or the other, because there's a legitimate way to look at this from both sides. But there's a way in which you can look at it and say, well, look, the university's job is to provide people who have excellent technical skills who are prepared for the workforce, basically, and that we're not in the business of getting into other areas that are not about that. And so it's kind of an eye-opening thing.
Steve, thanks a lot for joining us today to preview the documentary.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's Steve Mims. He's a writer and director of the documentary Starving the Beast, The Battle to Disrupt and Reform America's Public Universities. It'll be shown next Wednesday and Thursday at the Wisconsin Film Festival. You can go to wifilmfest.org for a schedule.